The night was calm in the small coastal city of Mirren. The waves rolled gently onto the dark sand, and the smell of salt drifted in the cool air. Most of the houses were dark, their owners already asleep. Far out at sea, the fishing boats were heading back to the harbor, their small lights bobbing on the water. Darren stood at the edge of the wooden pier, his hands resting on the old rail. He was a fisherman, but tonight he was not fishing. His boat had been repaired earlier that day, and he had decided to stay ashore, enjoying the quiet. The stars above glittered in a clear sky, and the moon shone bright. It was the kind of night where nothing seemed likely to happen. Then he saw a dot at first. He thought it was a shooting star, a streak of silver light moving fast across the heavens. But instead of fading, it grew brighter. It was not falling in a random path. It was moving with purpose. The silver glow cut across the stars, lowered toward the horizon, and then aimed directly toward the bay. Darren's brow furrowed. This was no meteor dot. The object slowed, its light dimming until its shape was visible. It was long and smooth, with curved sides that seemed to shimmer. A low hum rolled through the air, almost too deep to hear, but enough to make the wooden boards of the pier tremble. The object descended slowly until it touched the water with a gentle hiss of steam. Darren's first thought was to run into town and tell someone, but something in him told him to stay. His heart pounded in his chest as the craft floated closer to the shore. It was about the size of a small fishing boat, but its surface was unlike any metal he knew. It shifted in color. Silver one moment, pale blue the next. A seam appeared along its side, and with a smooth hiss, a doorway opened. From the doorway stepped a figure. She was tall, dressed in silver and blue armor that caught the moonlight. Her hair, long and dark, flowed behind her in the night breeze. The armor was detailed with fine patterns, like waves frozen in steel. A long cloak hung from her shoulders, swaying slightly, even from a distance. Darren could see that she stood with perfect posture, her head high as if she belonged to another world entirely. She walked toward him across the wet sand, her boots leaving no sound. As she drew closer, Darren could see her face clearly. She had the look of someone who had been through storms but had not let them break her. Her eyes, sharp and steady, seemed to look right through him. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the waves filled the silence. "Are you from here?" she asked finally, her voice calm but carrying a weight of urgency. Darren hesitated. "Yes, I live here." "Who are you?" She stepped closer until she stood just a few paces away. "My name is Alira," she said, "and I need your help." The way she spoke was not like a request from a traveler lost on the road. It was as if the matter was too serious for delay. Darren looked past her to the strange craft resting in the shallows. "That thing you came in, it's not from Earth, is it?" Alira's gaze did not waver. "No, I come from a place far beyond your skies. I cannot tell you everything here, not in the open, but I had no choice but to come to this world." He studied her for a moment, unsure if he was dreaming. "And you came straight to me?" Her lips pressed together as if she were weighing her words. "I found you by chance, but perhaps chance is what I need. I cannot stay here long. Others will come for me." The tone of her voice carried no sign of fear, only a quiet strength. Darren scratched the back of his neck. "I don't know what you're running from, but if it's dangerous, it is," she said, cutting him off. "And it will reach this place if I'm not careful." The wind picked up slightly, tugging at her cloak. Darren glanced again at her ship. "So, what do you want from me?" Alira looked at him directly. "Shelter. And time to explain. I can offer you something in return, but we must move quickly. There are those who will track me even here." Darren hesitated. Every part of this felt unreal. A stranger from beyond the stars stepping onto his quiet shore, speaking of danger, and needing his help. Yet something in her eyes convinced him she was telling the truth. "There's an old warehouse by the harbor," he said finally. "It's empty this time of year. No one will find us there." She nodded once. "Lead the way." Darren turned and began walking down the pier, the wooden boards creaking under his boots. Alira followed, her steps light and steady. Behind them, the The strange silver craft remained in the shallows, its door closed again, its surface reflecting the moonlight, as they walked through the narrow streets toward the dark outline of the warehouse. Darren couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something far larger than himself. He did not know why she had come, or what danger followed her, but he could feel it. His life was about to change, and the quiet nights of Mirren would not return for a long time, and somewhere out there, beyond the stars, someone else was already moving toward them. The old warehouse stood at the far edge of the harbor. Its wooden frame was weathered from years of salt and wind. The doors groaned when Darren pushed them open, and the smell of old rope and dried fish filled the air. Inside, the space was dim, except for the moonlight spilling through cracks in the roof. Alira stepped inside without hesitation. Her silver and blue armor caught the faint light, and her cloak brushed the dusty floor. She moved with a strange mix of caution and certainty, as if every place she entered might hold danger, but she was ready to face it. Darren closed the heavy doors behind them. "No one comes here at night," he said. "We'll be safe for a while." Alira glanced around, scanning every shadow before she spoke. "Safe is not something I can promise for long," she said. "They will search for me. The only question is how soon." Darren leaned against an old crate. "You said you needed my help. I'm still trying to understand why. I'm not a soldier or anything like that. I'm just a fisherman." She turned to him, her expression firm. "It is not your strength with weapons I need. It is something only you can give me. A choice, a bond." Darren frowned. "What kind of bond?" Alira's gaze did not leave his. "I am crown heir of the Celis Dominion. It is an empire that rules across many star systems, but our laws are as old as our stars. One law says that when the time comes, the heir must be married before the next cycle of our homeworld sun is complete. If not, the throne passes to another, and the heir's line is broken." Darren listened in silence. This sounded like a story from an old tale, not something spoken in a cold warehouse by a woman who had just arrived from another world. "Why come here?" he asked. "Surely you have someone in your own empire." Alira's eyes hardened slightly. "I had no choice. The noble houses are full of rivals. If I marry one of them, I give my enemies power over the throne, and if I refuse, the law will strip me of my crown. But there is an old rule, rarely used, that allows the heir to wed ascension from outside the Dominion. If that union is recognized, it protects the throne from being claimed by the noble houses. That is why I came here. Earth is not yet part of the Dominion. You're beyond their reach." Darren shifted uncomfortably. "So you're saying you came here to marry me?" The words hung in the cold air. Alira spoke with no hesitation. "Yes, I came to ask for your hand. I understand. How strange this sounds. But it is the only way I can keep my crown, and keep my enemies from claiming it." Darren laughed once, but not from humor. "You could have picked anyone else on this planet. Why me?" Her voice was calm. "I chose the first person I found who was alone, away from the noise of cities, and unconnected to powerful groups, someone who could listen before deciding. That was you." Darren rubbed his forehead. "You don't even know me." "I will learn," she replied, "and you will have the choice to say no. But if you do, I will have to keep running until they catch me, and if they do, it will not end with me. Your world will be dragged into a conflict it does not yet understand." The weight in her words made the air feel heavier. Darren thought of Mirren's quiet streets, the fishing boats, the children who played along the docks. He imagined strange ships filling the sky, battles fought over something no one here had even heard of. "So it's not just about you," he said slowly. "No," Alira answered. "If I fall, my enemies will seek to claim Earth as part of their victory. The Dominion's law may protect you for now, but the ambition of those who fight for the crown knows no limits." Darren paced a few steps. His mind was racing. Marrying someone from another world, a stranger, was not something he had ever imagined. But if what she said was true, refusing might bring more danger than accepting. "What happens if I say yes?" he asked at last. Alira's tone softened. "If you agree, we must go to the nearest Dominion portal. There, We will travel to the High Assembly. The marriage will be recorded and recognized across the Dominion. Once that is done, my claim to the crown will be secure, and your world will be safe. And if I say no," her eyes met his again, "then I will keep running, but I will not last. They will catch me, and when they do, they will come here." Darren stood still for a long moment. The sound of distant waves faint in the silence. Finally, he sighed. "You're asking me to believe a lot." "I am," Alira said. "But you saw my ship. You know I am not from your world. You have already stepped into this whether you wish to or not. Now I'm asking you to take the next step willingly." Before Darren could answer, a sudden flash lit up the warehouse from outside. A low hum vibrated through the walls, the same kind of hum he had heard when her ship arrived. Alira's expression sharpened. "They found me." Darren moved toward the door, but she held out her hand to stop him. "Not yet," she said. "We can still move before they close in. But you must decide now. Do you come with me to protect both our worlds, or do I leave you here and face them alone?" The choice was there, pressing on him like the tide, pressing against the shore. Outside, faint lights moved in the fog over the harbor. The fog over the harbor was thick, rolling in from the sea in long, pale sheets. The faint lights outside the warehouse moved slowly at first, then quicker, weaving between the shadows of the fishing boats. Darren stood frozen, his breath shallow. "What are those?" he whispered. Alira's eyes were fixed on the glow. "Hunters," she said quietly. "Machines sent by my enemies. They can follow the trace of my life signature. They will not stop until they find me." Darren glanced toward the back door. "Then we can't stay here." "No," she agreed. "We move now. Follow me and keep low." Without another word, she slipped toward the far side of the warehouse, her movements silent. Darren followed, trying not to trip over the scattered nets and ropes on the floor. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Alira pushed open a narrow side door that led into an alley behind the building. The cold night air rushed in. They stepped out, closing the door gently so it wouldn't slam. The alley was dim, lit only by a weak street lamp at the far end. The fog swirled around their legs as they moved quickly behind them. The low hum grew louder. "They're closer," Alira said. They crossed the narrow alley and slipped into another street, keeping to the shadows of closed shops. Darren knew these streets well, but at night, with the fog so thick, they felt strange and unfamiliar. "What will they do if they find you?" Darren asked as they hurried along. "They will capture me," Alira replied, "and they will send word to my rival, Lord Vaynor. Once I am in his hands, he will claim the throne without challenge, and Earth will be seen as aiding me, which means it will be marked as a target." Darren felt a knot in his stomach. "So if they catch you, they'll come after my world too." "Yes," she said simply. "That is why I came here, not only to save myself, but to protect this place before it becomes part of a larger war." A sudden flash lit the street ahead, a beam of pale blue light sweeping slowly between buildings. Alira stopped and pulled Darren into the shadow of a doorway. The light passed by, then moved on. "They're scanning," she said softly. "We need to get higher." "Higher?" Darren asked. "There's a hill above the old harbor wall," she explained. "If we reach it, we can cross into the high streets without being trapped." Darren nodded. "This way." They moved through back lanes and narrow paths between houses, the sound of the waves fading behind them every so often. The humming sound would return, closer than before. At one corner, they almost collided with a small hovering machine. It was shaped like a sphere, with 3 glowing eyes and a thin frame of silver metal. It turned toward them at once. Alira reacted instantly. She pulled a small device from her belt, pressed a button, and threw it at the machine. There was a sharp crack of light, and the sphere froze midair before dropping silently to the cobblestones. "What was that?" Darren asked, breathing fast. "A pulse charge," Alira replied. "It disables them for a short time, but they will send more." They pressed on, moving quickly toward the base of the hill. The streets here were narrow, the buildings leaning close together like old friends sharing secrets. Their footsteps echoed softly. As they neared the slope, a new sound filled the air, a sharp, whirring buzz. Out of the fog ahead, two larger machines emerged, each one shaped like a long insect with thin wings that glimmered faintly. Their eyes glowed the same pale blue as the hunters before, and they moved with swift, jerking motions. Alira grabbed Darren's arm. Run! They sprinted up the hill, the machines darting after them. The whir of wings grew louder. Darren's lungs burned, but he kept moving. Left, Alira called. They turned into a side path, the uneven stone slippery underfoot. The machines tried to follow, but the tight turns slowed them. At the top of the hill stood the old harbor wall, its stones dark and worn by centuries of salt and wind. Beyond it, the land sloped down toward the high streets of Mirren. We're almost there, Darren said between breaths. Alira glanced back. The machines had found a wider path and were gaining speed again. She reached into her armor and pulled out another device. This one a small disc with a faint green light at its center. What's that? Darren asked. A shield, she said, pressing a button. A thin shimmer appeared in the air behind them, like heat rising from stone. The first machine hit it and bounced back, spinning before crashing into the wall. The second swerved sharply, avoiding the barrier but losing precious seconds. Go, Alira urged. They crossed the harbor wall and started down toward the high streets from here. The fog was thinner, and the warm glow of street lamps lit the road. A few late-night workers glanced their way, but no one spoke, perhaps sensing that trouble followed them. At the edge of the high streets, Alira slowed. They will search the lower harbor first. We have some time now, but not much. We must keep moving inland. Darren nodded, still trying to catch his breath. Where exactly are we going? To the old observatory, she said. It's high enough to scan the sky and safe enough to plan our next move from there. We can find the nearest portal site. As they moved on, Darren looked over his shoulder at the dark streets below. Somewhere in that fog, the hunters were still searching. He realized that his life had already changed and there was no going back. Above them, the stars shone faintly through a break in the clouds, as if watching to see what choice he would make next. The climb to the observatory was long and steep. The road wound upward through narrow lanes and old stone steps, passing houses with shuttered windows. Lamps burned faintly behind some of them, but most were dark. The air grew colder the higher they went, and the fog thinned, revealing more of the starry sky above. Darren kept glancing over his shoulder. The streets behind them were empty, but he couldn't relax. You think we lost them? He asked. For now, Alira said, but they will not give up. Hunters are built to track for days, even weeks. If needed, then we'd better make this quick. Darren muttered. They reached the top of the hill, where the old observatory stood like a watchtower over the city. Its dome was dark, the paint peeling, and the heavy wooden door hung slightly crooked. Darren pushed it open, and the hinges gave a soft creak. Inside, the air was dry and smelled faintly of dust and metal. Alira stepped in and looked around. This will do, she said. The main room was circular, with the large telescope still mounted at its center. The glass was cracked, but the stand was sturdy. A small window on the far side gave a view of the sea, where the fog glowed faintly under the moon. Darren lit an old oil lamp he found near the door, filling the room with a warm, flickering light. Alira removed a small device from her belt. It was no bigger than a book, with a glowing screen covered in strange symbols. She set it on the telescope's base and tapped the screen. What is that? Darren asked. A locator, she said. It will search for the nearest Dominion portal on your world. We will need it to leave. Darren leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Before we go running off to other worlds, maybe you should tell me everything. No half-truths this time. Alira looked at him for a moment, then nodded. You deserve to know. She began pacing slowly, her voice steady. The Celos Dominion is one of the largest powers in the known galaxy. It has stood for thousands of years, but its laws are older still. One of those laws says that when the crown heir reaches a certain age, they must marry before the end of the next solar cycle on our homeworld. If they do not, The throne is taken from them, and their bloodline is ended. Darren raised an eyebrow. And that's what's happening. To you? Yes, my cycle ends soon. My enemies know this, and they have done everything to delay me. They hope that I will fail, so the throne passes to them without a fight. Lord Vaynor is the strongest among them. If he takes the crown, he will not stop at ruling the Dominion. He will expand it, and Earth will be in his path. Why Earth? Because it is unclaimed, and because it is full of resources. The Dominion's law says it cannot be taken unless the world's leaders agree. But if Earth is seen as aiding me, that protection will be gone. Darren frowned. So you came here to... What? Hide? Alira shook her head. To marry. The law says the heir can marry any sentient recognized by the Dominion, even one from a world outside its control. That is the only way to keep the crown and stop Vaynor from seizing it. But it must be witnessed by the High Assembly in the capital system. Darren stared at her. And you picked me. You were the first I found who was alone, unconnected to any power, and willing to listen. I could have searched longer. But the hunters were already near. You were my chance, and I took it. He ran a hand through his hair. You know this sounds impossible, right? I'm just some fisherman from a quiet city. I don't even know how your laws work, let alone how to stand in front of this assembly of yours. Alira's voice softened. You would not stand there as a fisherman. You would stand there as my husband and as the man who saved the heir to the throne. That alone would command respect. Darren let out a long breath. And if I say no, her eyes met his. Then I keep running until I am caught. When I am, Vaynor will win. He will reach for Earth sooner than you can imagine, and the quiet life you know will vanish. The room was silent for a long time, broken only by the faint hum of the locator device. Darren walked to the window and looked out at the sea. The fog was still thick below, and the lights of the harbor flickered faintly through it. Somewhere down there, machines from another world were searching for them. This isn't just about you, he said finally. No, Alira replied. It is about both of us, and about two worlds that do not yet know they are connected. The locator device gave a soft chime. Alira stepped over and checked it. I've found the nearest portal. It's on the other side of the continent, hidden inside a Dominion outpost. We will have to travel far and avoid their patrols. Darren turned from the window. And those hunters, they will follow. But if we move quickly, we can stay ahead of them. He studied her for a moment. She stood tall despite the long night, her armor faintly catching the lamplight. She had the bearing of someone used to command, but there was something else in her eyes. A quiet hope, waiting for his answer. All right, Darren said at last. I'll help you. But not just because you're asking. If what you're saying is true, this is the only way to keep my world out of your fight. Alira's expression eased, and for the first time since they met, she allowed herself a small smile. Then we have an agreement. She extended her hand. Darren took it, feeling the cold, smooth metal of her gauntlet. In that moment, the weight of his decision settled on him. He was stepping into something far greater than himself, and there would be no turning back. Outside, somewhere far below, the hum of the hunters returned. Faint but growing. They had made their choice. Now they would have to survive it. The road out of Mirren was quiet before dawn. The streets were empty except for a few early traders preparing their carts. The fog had lifted, leaving a thin chill in the air. Darren walked beside Alira, their steps quick but steady. She wore her cloak pulled low over her armor, hiding the bright metal from curious eyes. In his hand, Darren carried a small bag with food, water, and a few tools. The portal is far, Alira said as they reached the open countryside. We will have to cross the highlands. It is faster than the main roads, but also more dangerous. How? Darren asked. Open land gives the hunters room to move freely, she explained. And Vaynor may have sent others ahead. Darren glanced at the rolling hills ahead. Then we'll just have to move fast. They followed a narrow dirt path that wound through grassy slopes and scattered trees. Birds called from the branches, and the early sunlight painted the land in gold. For a while, the beauty of the morning almost made Darren forget they were being hunted. But Alira never slowed. She scanned the horizon often, her eyes sharped out. By midday, the hills grew steeper. The path climbed between rocky ridges where the wind whistled through cracks in the stone. Darren stopped to drink from his canteen. How much farther? 2 days if we keep moving, Alira replied. Less if we push hard, Darren sighed. Guess we'd better push. They started climbing again. As they reached the crest of one hill, Alira suddenly held up a hand. Stop. Darren froze. What is it? She pointed toward a valley below. In the grass, several dark shapes moved in a slow, searching pattern. At first, Darren thought they were animals, but then he saw the metallic gleam. Hunters? He whispered. Yes, she said. And not just scouts. Those are combat drones. The drones were larger than the machines in Mirren, with 4 legs, each and a pair of rotating weapons on their backs. They moved with a smooth, predatory pace, scanning the ground with pale blue beams. We can't go through there, Darren said. No. Alira agreed. We go round, but they will sense movement if we are too close. They turned away from the valley, climbing along the ridge instead. For a while, it seemed the drones had not noticed them. Then, a sudden mechanical screech cut through the air. They've seen us, Alira said. From below, one of the drones fired a pulse of blue light. It struck the rocks near their feet, sending a spray of dust into the air. Run. They sprinted along the ridge as the drones began climbing. Toward them, the metal legs dug into the earth with terrifying speed. Another pulse shot past Darren's shoulder, close enough to feel the heat. Alira pulled a small cylinder from her belt and twisted it. A moment later, smoke poured out, thick and white, spilling across the ridge. This will block their sensors. For a moment, she said. They ducked into the smoke, running blind along the uneven ground. Darren stumbled over a loose stone but caught himself before falling. Behind them, the whirring of the drones grew louder. There's a pass ahead, Alira said. If we can reach it, the rocks will block their line of fire. The smoke began to thin. Darren could see the narrow pass, to tall cliffs rising on either side. Leaving only a thin path between them, they ran for it. The first drone reached the edge of the smoke and fired again. The pulse struck the cliff wall, breaking off a chunk of stone that crashed to the ground beside them. Move, Alira urged. They dove into the pass just as the drones came into view. The narrow space forced the machines to slow, their long legs struggling to fit between the rocks. Alira turned and pulled another device from her belt, a flat disc with glowing edges. She threw it onto the ground, and it stuck fast. Cover your ears, she warned. Darren did as she said. A moment later, the disc let out a sharp burst of sound, so high and piercing it made the air vibrate. The drones staggered, their legs jerking. Then one by one, they collapsed, their lights flickering out. What was that? Darren asked, lowering his hands. A disruptor, Alira replied. It overloads their balance systems. They will recover, but not quickly. They didn't wait to see if she was right. They pushed through the rest of the pass and out onto a plateau. From here, the land stretched in wide, rolling hills, and far in the distance, a dark line marked the edge of a forest. We rest there, Alira said, pointing to the trees. They reached the forest by late afternoon. The tall pines blocked the wind, and the ground was soft with fallen needles. They stopped beside a small stream to drink. Darren sat on a fallen log, catching his breath. You fight like you've done this 1,000 times. I have, Alira said simply. It is what my life has been. Battles, escapes, negotiations. Always moving, always watching. He looked at her. Doesn't it get tiring? For a moment, she was silent. Then she said, yes, but I don't have the choice to stop. If I do, everything I stand for will fall. Darren didn't know what to say to that. He could see the weight she carried, not just the fight to survive, but the duty to protect something far greater than herself. They rested for a short while before moving on. As night fell, they found shelter in a shallow cave along a hillside. The air was cold, but the rock kept out the wind. Darren built a small fire while Lyra checked her locator device. We are closer now, she said. One more day's travel, and we will be in range of the portal. And then what? Darren asked. Then we reach the High Assembly, she said. And you will speak for Earth before them? He gave a Quiet laugh. I still don't know what I'd say. You will know when the time comes, she said. Outside, the night was silent except for the distant cry of some wild animal. But Darren knew the hunters were still out there, somewhere, in the dark, and tomorrow, they would be closer. The morning air was cold when Darren and Alira left the shelter of the cave. The forest ahead was silent except for the rustle of leaves in the wind. Above, the sky was pale and streaked with thin clouds, a sign that rain might come later. Alira led the way, her steps light and quick. She carried her spear in one hand. Scanning the trees for any sign of movement, Darren followed close behind. Feeling the weight of the journey in his legs. How far now? He asked quietly. By midday. We should see the portal outpost. Alira replied. It will be guarded. But I hope we arrive before Vaner's forces. The trail wound through thick woods, over streams and mossy stones. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. For a while, the walk was peaceful, almost calm. But Darren knew danger was never far away. They climbed a ridge, and at the top, Alira. Stop! There, she said, pointing Dot in the distance, past a stretch of rolling grassland. Stood the portal outpost. It was built from smooth white metal, with tall spires reaching toward the sky. In the center, a ring of blue energy shimmered, and spun slowly, like a giant wheel of light. That's it? Darren asked. Yes, the Gate of Worlds, Alira said. Through it, we reached the High Assembly. They started down the slope, moving quickly, but halfway across the grassland, Alira froze. She knelt, pressing her hand to the ground. What is it? Darren whispered. Vibrations, she said. Machines are moving. Many of them. They looked toward the outpost and saw dark shapes emerging from the far side. Vaner's soldiers. Sleek, silver-armored figures moved in formation, their weapons glinting in the sunlight. Behind them rolled a massive war machine with legs like a spider and a turret on its back. They're already here, Darren said, his voice tight. Alira's eyes narrowed. Then we have no time to wait. They ran, staying low in the tall grass. The wind carried the hum of engines and the steady, metallic steps of the soldiers. As they neared the outpost, Alira guided Darren toward a cluster of storage crates stacked near the outer fence. Stay here, she said. I will create a path. When I signal, follow me. Before Darren could argue, she was gone, moving with the silent speed of a hunter. He waited, heart pounding, listening to the shouts of soldiers as Alira's figure slipped between them. A moment later, a loud blast shook the air. Smoke rose from the far side of the yard, and the soldiers turned toward it. Alira's voice cut through the noise. Now, Darren sprinted from cover. He saw her waving from near the portal platform. Between them stood two guards. Alira struck the first with her spear, knocking him to the ground. The second raised his weapon, but Darren, without thinking, grabbed a loose pipe from the ground and swung it hard, sending the weapon clattering away. Move, Alira urged. They dashed up the ramp to the portal. The energy ring hummed louder, now glowing brighter as they approached. But before they could step through, a deep voice echoed behind them. Going somewhere, Princess? Vaner. He stood at the base of the ramp, his dark armor reflecting the light of the portal. Around him, more soldiers gathered, blocking the way back. This ends here, Vaner said. Surrender, and I may spare your companion. Alira's grip on her spear tightened. You will not touch him or the throne. Vaner's eyes narrowed. You cannot win. We don't need to win, Darren said suddenly. We just need to get through. Vaner raised a hand, and his soldiers stepped forward. The war machine's turret rotated, aiming at the portal. Alira looked at Darren. Stay behind me. She moved fast, leaping down the ramp into the soldiers. Her spear spun in her hands, striking armored joints and knocking weapons aside. Darren didn't waste time. He ran for the portal controls. The panel was strange, filled with symbols he didn't understand, but one large lever stood out. He pulled it, and the portal flared to life, the air rippling with power. Alira, he shouted. She broke free from the soldiers and sprinted up the ramp, Vaner right behind her. The war machine fired. A bolt of energy shot toward them. But Alira grabbed Darren and dove through the shimmering light. The world spun. Colors swirled, and the ground seemed to vanish. For a moment, there was no sound, no air, no weight. Then they landed hard on a polished stone floor. Darren groaned, pushing himself up. They were inside a vast chamber filled with tall windows and golden banners. Dozens of alien figures stood in a wide circle, watching them. At the center was a raised platform. The High Assembly. Alira stood, her armor marked with scratches, her hair loose around her face. She stepped forward and bowed her head. Honored Assembly, I bring before you a witness from Earth, a world under threat. The tallest figure in the circle, with skin like polished stone, spoke in a deep voice. And who is this witness? Darren swallowed. Every eye was on him. My name is Darren, he said, his voice unsteady. I'm just an ordinary human, but I've seen what's coming, and if we don't act together, it will destroy us all. A low murmur passed through the assembly. One of them asked, and why should we help your world? Darren glanced at Alira. She gave the smallest nod. Because, Darren said, if Earth falls, it won't end there. The same enemy will come for you, and when they do, you'll wish you had an ally who stood with you first. The chamber fell, silent. Then, slowly, the leader of the assembly spoke again. You have courage, human. We will hear your words. Behind them, the portal shimmered, and through it, a shadow moved. Vaynor had followed. Alira stepped between Darren and them. Light, we are not done yet, she whispered. The chamber of the High Assembly seemed to hold its breath. The shimmering portal behind Darren and Alira pulsed with light, and through it stepped Vaynor. His dark armor gleamed under the golden banners, his presence filling the hall with a heavy tension. The assembly guards moved quickly, raising their weapons. But the leader of the assembly lifted a hand. Let him speak. We will hear all sides. Vaynor strode forward, his voice strong and cold. Honored assembly, you are being misled. The so-called princess before you has broken the sacred order of the galaxies. She hides behind a human stranger to claim a crown that should be mine by right. Alira's eyes narrowed. Your right was taken by force and cruelty, Vaynor. The throne is not yours to keep. Vaynor turned to the gathered council. She refuses the traditions of our people. She would tie our future to a single fragile world, one not even part of our system. Is this the ruler you would trust? The assembly murmured in low voices. Darren felt the weight of their gaze shifting. He knew Vaynor was skilled at turning words into weapons. Darren took a step forward. I'm not here to take anything from your people. I'm here because what's coming will destroy all of us if we stand apart. Vaynor's path is one of fear and power. Alira's path is one of alliance. Vaynor's voice was sharp. Alliance? With Earth, a world that still fights itself, that has not mastered even its own oceans? They cannot stand beside us. They can learn. Alira said firmly. They can grow, as we once did. The leader of the assembly looked from one to the other. This is no simple matter. The law states the ruler must be bound to a sworn partner before the coronation day ends. If she has no partner, her claim is lost. The words hung heavy in the air. Darren understood then why Alira's plea had been so desperate when they first met. Without that bond, she would lose not only her crown, but her ability to protect her people from Vaynor's rule. One of the council members asked, Human, do you understand what this bond means? It is not only a symbol. It is a promise to stand with her in war and peace for all your life. Darren felt every eye on him. He thought of Earth, unready for war with the stars. He thought of Alira, who had risked her life again and again to protect him. And he thought of Vaynor's forces spreading across the galaxies if she fell. I understand, Darren said. Vaynor stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. You cannot allow this. He is untested. He is unworthy. Alira's voice was steady. Worth is not measured by bloodlines, Vaynor. It is measured by courage. The leader of the assembly raised a hand. Then the choice is simple. Does the princess have her sworn partner? Alira turned to Darren. Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper. Darren of Earth, will you stand with me as my partner under the law of the crown? Darren met her gaze. Yes, I will. The assembly hall stirred with voices. The leader struck. the floor with a ceremonial staff, calling for silence. Then it is done. By the law of the crown, the throne remains hers. The coronation will proceed. Vaner's face darkened. This is a mistake you will regret. Before the guards could move, he reached for his weapon. But Alira was already in motion. She stepped in front of Darren, her spear flashing in the light. Vaner's first strike was blocked, the sound echoing through the hall. The assembly guards surged forward, joining the fight, but Vaner was strong, his armor turning aside most blows. He struck down to guards and advanced again toward the throne. Darren looked to the portal. It still shimmered, its surface unstable. If Vaner escaped through it, he could rally his forces and return stronger. Alira, Darren called. The portal. She understood instantly. Together they pushed Vaner back toward the gate. He fought fiercely, his strikes shaking her spear. But step by step they forced him closer. At the edge of the platform, Darren saw his chance. While Vaner was locked against Alira's spear, Darren dashed to the portal controls and slammed his hand on the emergency seal button. The portal flared brightly, then collapsed in a flash of light. Vaner staggered, caught off balance. Alira swept her spear low, knocking his legs from under him. The guards closed in, binding his arms with glowing restraints. It is over, the leader of the assembly declared. Vaner glared at them all. You think this ends with me? Others will come. The galaxy will bow. Alira stood over him, her voice calm. Not while I wear the crown. The guards led Vaner away. The hall slowly filled with the sound of relieved voices. The leader turned to Alira. You have proven not only your right to rule, but your strength to defend the crown. May your reign bring unity to the stars. Alira bowed her head. Thank you, honored assembly. She glanced at Darren and added, and I will not forget the human who stood with me when all seemed lost. Later, as the sun dipped low over the assembly city, Alira and Darren stood on the palace balcony. The streets below were alive with light and music, celebrating her coronation. You know, Darren said, I never thought I'd end up, well, part of a royal bond in another galaxy. Alira smiled. Neither did I, but the crown is more than a title. It is a promise, one I intend to keep. Darren looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond them, Earth still turned, unaware of how close danger had come. Then I guess we start preparing for what's next. Alira nodded. Yes, the galaxy is wide, and the shadows are never far. But together, we will face them, and in that moment, with the wind carrying the sound of distant celebration and the stars stretching endless above, Darren knew the fight had been worth it. The crown was safe, the alliance was born, and the future, though uncertain, was theirs too. Shape,